At the airport, I thought I was heading to do something beautiful in my late wife's name. My stepdaughter appeared out of nowhere, holding a smoothie she had made herself. Mango and ginger, just like Margaret used to make. She watched me drink every last drop. 20 minutes after takeoff, my chest locked shut. My lungs burned. My hands went cold. Through the blur, a stranger grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Someone did this to you." When I woke up, I understood the truth. Someone wanted me gone, and I decided to disappear on my own terms. Thank you for being here. It truly means a lot. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love seeing how far these journeys reach. A quick note. Some elements have been shaped for storytelling and reflection. Any similarities are unintentional, but the message behind this story is meant to leave an impact. Thank you for listening. That October morning in 2024, the air inside Denver International Airport smelled like burnt espresso and floor cleaner. Gate B47 was half empty. A woman in a business suit typed furiously on her laptop. A young father bounced a toddler on his knee near the window. Ordinary people living ordinary mornings. I sat among them with a leather carry-on at my feet and a smoothie in my hand, and I had no idea that in less than 20 minutes I would be dying. Nicole had appeared at my house 3 hours earlier. My stepdaughter. The girl I had raised since she was 10 years old. The girl who had spoon-fed my wife Margaret when Alzheimer's stole her ability to hold a fork. The girl who had bathed Margaret, read to her, held her hand through 8 years of slow, merciless forgetting. That same girl had handed me this smoothie at the gate with a smile that showed every tooth but never quite touched her eyes. "I made it myself, Dad," she had said. "Mango and ginger. Mom's recipe. I thought you would want a piece of her with you on this trip. Mom's recipe, Margaret's recipe." The smoothie my wife had blended every single morning for 25 years in our kitchen in Denver, humming Claire de Lune while the blender roared. The last time I had tasted it was from Margaret's own hands, 3 weeks before she forgot my name entirely. 3 weeks before the woman I loved looked at me across the breakfast table and asked, with genuine confusion, "Who are you?" So when Nicole handed me that cup at gate B47, I did not question it. I drank. I drank because it tasted like Margaret. I drank because grief makes you stupid. I drank because I trusted the girl I had raised, and trust, I have learned, is the most dangerous thing a man my age can carry. The flight to Asheville was scheduled for 3 hours and 14 minutes. I was heading to the Blue Ridge Mountains to finalize the donation of our family cabin to the Alzheimer's Research Foundation in Margaret's name. It was a promise I had made to her before the disease swallowed the last pieces of who she was. A promise that had taken me 2 years to find the courage to keep. I settled into seat 14A, window side. Buckled in. The smoothie sat in my stomach, warm and familiar. The engines hummed. Denver shrank beneath us, the Rocky Mountains catching the morning sun like teeth made of gold. For a few minutes, everything felt almost peaceful. Then my mouth went dry. Not the normal kind of dry. This was sudden, absolute, as if someone had packed my tongue in cotton. I reached for the water bottle in the seat pocket, but my fingers would not close around it. They tingled first, then burned, then went completely numb, as though my hands had been submerged in ice water and held there. My chest tightened. Not pain exactly, but pressure. Enormous and suffocating, like an invisible hand pressing down on my sternum with slow, deliberate force. I tried to inhale. The air felt thick, heavy, as if I were breathing through wet cloth. My heart slammed against my ribs in a rhythm that was wrong. Too fast, then too slow, then skipping beats entirely. The cabin lights above me flared painfully bright. The edges of my vision shimmered and warped. The young father across the aisle dissolved into a smear of color. Sounds stretched and distorted. The captain's voice over the intercom bending into something unrecognizable, like words spoken underwater. I gripped the armrest. My knuckles turned white, but I could not feel the pressure. I could not feel anything below my wrists. A metallic taste flooded my mouth, sharp and bitter, coating my tongue like I had been chewing on old pennies. And beneath that taste, something else. Something faintly sweet. Mango. Ginger. Margaret's recipe. No. Nicole's recipe now. Nicole's weapon. I tried to stand. My legs refused. I pushed myself upward, one hand bracing against the seat in front of me. For one suspended, hopeful second, I thought I might make it. Then my knees buckled. The aisle tilted sideways. The floor rushed up to meet me. I hit the ground hard. The impact cracked through my jaw and shoulder. The carpet smelled like recycled air and chemical cleaner. Somewhere far away, a woman screamed. Footsteps thundered closer. Hands gripped my shoulders, rolling me onto my back. The ceiling lights exploded into white stars, spinning, multiplying. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the brightness burned through my eyelids. Voices layered over one another. Panicked, confused, distant. Then one voice cut through everything. Steady, controlled, not panicked. Stay with me. My name is Priya. I am a doctor. I forced my eyes open. A woman hovered over me. Dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, black hair pulled back into a practical braid. One hand pressed against my wrist, fingers checking my pulse with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her other hand lifted my eyelid, examining my pupil. Dilated, she murmured. Uneven response. Diaphoretic. This is not cardiac. She leaned closer. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Meant only for me. Someone did this to you. The words landed like a verdict. Because she was right. And somewhere in the airport I had just left, my stepdaughter was probably already walking to her car, smoothie cup in the trash, smiling. The darkness surged upward, swallowing everything. The last thought that flickered through my mind before the world went black was not anger. It was not fear. It was something worse. It was recognition. The smoothie had tasted exactly like Margaret's because Nicole had learned the recipe from her. She had learned it at 12 years old, standing beside her stepmother in our kitchen, laughing as mango pulp splattered across the counter. Margaret had taught her that recipe as an act of love. Nicole had used it as a weapon, and as consciousness slipped away, I understood with terrible clarity that the girl I had raised, the girl I had loved like my own, had just tried to erase me from the world using the one thing I could never refuse, my wife's memory. That October morning, before any of this happened, I woke with a heaviness I could not explain. It was not pain that woke me. Not exactly. It was a pressure behind my ribs, quiet and persistent, like a stone dropped into deep water that never quite reached the bottom, a warning my body was sending that my mind could not yet translate. The autumn sun slipped through the bedroom curtains in thin golden threads, dust drifting lazily in the light. But the warmth did not reach me. It had not reached me in 2 years. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent in the way only empty houses can be. Not peaceful. Peace has a hum to it, a soft vibration of life moving through rooms. This was hollow, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and reminds you, gently and relentlessly, that you are alone. Margaret's side of the bed was untouched. The pillow still held the faint impression of her head, though that was probably my imagination. 2 years. 2 years since she had slept there. 8 years since she had truly been there. Before the Alzheimer's built its walls inside her mind, brick by invisible brick, until the woman who had taught 3rd grade for 22 years could no longer remember the alphabet. I sat up slowly. 71 years makes mornings less forgiving. My knees protested. My lower back announced itself with a dull, familiar ache. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and planted my feet on the cold hardwood floor, grounding myself in the sensation. Still here. Still upright. Still breathing. The house Margaret and I had built together in the early 90s sat on a quiet street in the Highlands neighborhood of Denver. I had been a federal judge then, 5 years into my appointment, and she had just received her teaching certification. We had designed every room ourselves, arguing over tile colors and cabinet heights, laughing when the contractor told us our ideas were structurally impossible. We built them anyway. Margaret had that effect on people. She made the impossible feel like a minor inconvenience. I moved through the hallway, with the careful deliberation of a man who has learned that rushing leads to stumbling. Every room carried her. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the cinnamon she used to sprinkle into her morning oatmeal. Her reading glasses rested in the top drawer of the nightstand, exactly where she had placed them the last time her hands remembered how to fold them. The piano in the living room sat beneath a thin layer of dust, its keys untouched, since the evening Margaret sat down to play Clair de Lune, and her fingers simply would not obey. That had been the beginning of the end. Not the diagnosis, not the first forgotten name, or the first misplaced word. It was the piano. Margaret had played Debussy's Clair de Lune every evening after dinner for as long as I had known her. It was her ritual, her meditation, her way of closing one day and welcoming the next. When her fingers stumbled over the opening notes, when she stared at the keys as though seeing them for the first time, I knew. The disease had reached the part of her that was most essentially Margaret. I stopped in the kitchen doorway and let my hand rest against the frame. The garden was visible through the window above the sink, overgrown now. Wild in a way Margaret would never have permitted. She had planted every flower herself, roses and lavender, and a stubborn patch of wildflowers that bloomed each spring despite the Colorado cold. I could not bring myself to tend it. Rearranging something she loved felt like erasing her handwriting from the margins of our life. The cabin. That was why I was awake this early. That was why my suitcase sat packed by the bedroom door. That was why a printed boarding pass rested on the kitchen counter beside a glass of water I had poured the night before and forgotten to drink. The cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, just outside Asheville, North Carolina, Margaret's sanctuary. We had bought it 31 years ago on a road trip through the Appalachian foothills. She had seen it from the highway. A small timber frame structure perched on a hillside, overlooking a valley thick with sugar, maples, and red oaks. She made me pull over immediately. By the end of the week, we owned it. Every summer, we drove from Denver to Asheville. Margaret would spend hours on the porch, reading novels and watching hummingbirds dip into the feeders she hung from every beam. She said the mountains reminded her of something she could not name, something old and patient and larger than herself. When the Alzheimer's began its work, the cabin was the last place she recognized. Even after she forgot my name, she would stand on that porch and smile, as though the mountains were speaking a language that needed no memory to understand. I had promised her I would give it away. Not sell it. Give it. To the Alzheimer's Research Foundation. In her name. The Margaret Graves Mountain Retreat. A place where caregivers and families could rest, recover, and remember that they were not alone. It was the last coherent conversation we had shared, 3 weeks before she stopped recognizing me entirely. "Promise me, Walter," she had whispered, her eyes briefly clear, briefly hers. "Promise me that place will help someone." I promise. 2 years I had carried that promise. 2 years of stalling, of finding reasons to delay, of telling myself I was not ready. The truth was simpler and uglier. Letting go of the cabin meant letting go of the last physical space where Margaret still existed. It meant admitting, in a way that no funeral or headstone ever could, that she was truly gone. But this morning I was going. The paperwork was prepared. My attorney, Frank, had arranged everything. I would fly to Asheville, sign the transfer documents at the foundation's office, visit Margaret's grave in the small cemetery behind the church where we had been married, and sit one last time on that porch while the October light painted the mountains in gold and amber. I checked my suitcase one final time. Clothes for 4 days. Margaret's favorite novel tucked into the side pocket, its spine cracked and soft from decades of rereading. A photograph of us on the cabin porch, taken the summer before her diagnosis, both of us laughing at something I could no longer remember. I zipped the suitcase shut and stood. The house settled around me, creaking softly in the October chill that crept through the old walls. Through the window, the Rocky Mountains stood sharp against the morning sky, their peaks dusted with the season's first snow. Then I heard the front door open downstairs. My first thought was James. My son had a key. But James was at his law office downtown. He had called the previous evening to wish me a safe trip. He would not come by, unannounced on a Tuesday morning. A voice floated up the staircase. Light. Bright. Practiced. Dad? I thought I would drive you to the airport. I froze, one hand still resting on the suitcase. Nicole. In 27 years of raising her, my stepdaughter had never once offered to drive me anywhere. She stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, dark jeans pressed with a crease sharp enough to cut paper. Her brown hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail that made her jawline look severe. At 37, Nicole carried herself with the kind of precision that suggested every detail had been chosen deliberately. The blazer, the posture, the smile, especially the smile. It was the smile I had seen at holiday dinners and family gatherings for years. Bright, wide, perfectly symmetrical, and absolutely empty behind the eyes. The kind of smile people practice in mirrors until it becomes automatic, until it requires no emotion at all to produce. That is very kind of you, I called down from the top of the stairs, keeping my voice neutral. But I was planning to call a cab. Do not be silly. Her footsteps climbed the staircase, quick and confident. You should not leave your car at the airport for a week. I am happy to drop you off. James is busy at the office, and I had the morning free anyway. She appeared in the bedroom doorway, and her gaze moved across the room in a way that felt less casual than it should have. It lingered for half a second on my suitcase, then shifted to the nightstand where my phone and wallet rested, then to the printed boarding pass on the dresser. A quick inventory. If I had not spent 30 years reading body language from a judge's bench, I might have missed it. Everett would have wanted me to help, she added softly, using my late wife's middle name for Margaret. The name Nicole had always used, privately between them. A name that carried warmth and history, a name designed to disarm me. Well, I said after a pause, if you insist. I do. She stepped forward and lifted my suitcase before I could reach for it. The gesture was efficient, almost rehearsed. We should leave soon. You do not want to miss your flight. The drive from my house in the Highlands to Denver International Airport normally took 35 minutes on Interstate 70. Nicole stretched it to nearly 50, taking side streets I did not recognize, looping through neighborhoods south of downtown before merging onto the highway. She chatted the entire time, light and steady, as though following a script she had memorized but not quite internalized. She talked about a marketing campaign she was managing for a client in Boulder. She mentioned the weather turning cold earlier than expected. She asked about James, about his caseload at the firm, about whether he was eating properly. Small talk. Filler. The conversational equivalent of static. I watched the city roll past my window and tried to silence the discomfort settling in my chest. The old theater on Colfax where Margaret and I had seen our first movie together. A terrible romantic comedy that she quoted for decades afterward. The park on 16th Street where I had taught James to ride a bicycle, running beside him with one hand on the seat until he pedaled away on his own, shrieking with joy. The bakery on Larimer Square that used to make Margaret's favorite almond croissants, closed now, its windows dark. You must be looking forward to the trip, Nicole said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror, getting away for a while. It is not exactly a vacation, I replied. Signing paperwork. Visiting Margaret's grave. Saying goodbye to the cabin. A pause. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The knuckles went pale. It must be hard, she said quietly. Letting go of Mom's favorite place. Mom. She still called Margaret that. After everything, after all the years, Nicole still used the word that Margaret had earned through patience and love and 8,000 mornings of braiding a little girl's hair before school. I remembered the day I brought Nicole home. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with enormous brown eyes that held a wariness far beyond her years. Margaret's daughter from a relationship before we met. The biological father had vanished when Nicole was 3. Margaret had raised her alone until I came along, and when Margaret and I married, I became the only father Nicole had ever known. She had been a quiet child, watchful. She observed everything and said little, as though she were cataloging the world and waiting to see if it would disappoint her. Margaret had worried about it sometimes, late at night in our bedroom, whispering her concerns while the house slept. She holds everything inside, Walter. She does not let anyone see what she is really thinking. I had dismissed it then. Children are quiet sometimes. Children adapt. But Margaret had seen something I had not. Margaret always saw things I missed. And when the Alzheimer's came, it was Nicole who stepped forward. Not James, who loved his mother, but could not bear to watch her dissolve. Not me, who buried myself in work and denial for the first 3 years. Nicole. She moved into the guest room. She learned the medication schedule. She pureed food when Margaret could no longer chew. She bathed her, dressed her, changed her sheets in the middle of the night, without complaint. For 5 years, Nicole was Margaret's hands when Margaret's hands forgot. She was Margaret's memory when Margaret's memory failed. She was the bridge between the woman Margaret had been and the fragile stranger Margaret became. I owed her for that. I had told her so many times. I owed her a debt I could never repay. And now she was driving me to the airport, asking about the cabin, and her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The foundation will take good care of it, I said, watching her reflection in the side mirror. Margaret would have wanted that. Of course, Nicole replied. Her voice was smooth, but something flickered behind her eyes, quick and dark, like a shadow passing behind a window. Of course she would. We pulled into the departures lane at Denver International Airport just after 8:15. The terminal was busy with Tuesday morning travelers, business commuters pulling roller bags, families juggling backpacks and boarding passes, taxi drivers honking at double-parked vehicles. Nicole found a spot near the entrance and insisted on carrying my suitcase inside. We walked through the automatic doors into the bright, cavernous terminal. The smell of coffee drifted from a Starbucks near the security checkpoint. Overhead announcements echoed against the white tent roof that made Denver International look like a mountain range made of fabric. Nicole stopped walking. She reached into her oversized leather handbag and pulled out a stainless steel thermos, the kind with a rubber grip and a screw-on lid. She held it out to me. I almost forgot, she said. I made this at home this morning. Before I came over, I looked at the thermos in her hand. Mango and ginger, she said. Mom's recipe. I thought you would want a piece of her with you on this trip. Her eyes were steady. Her voice did not waver. Her smile was the same one she had worn in my doorway that morning. Perfect and practiced and utterly unreadable. I reached out and took the thermos from her hand. It was warm. The weight of it felt familiar, like holding a memory. Thank you, Nicole, I said. That is very thoughtful. Drink it all, she said gently. It is a long flight. The thermos was warm against my palm. I unscrewed the lid, and the aroma rose instantly, sweet and sharp, mango blended with fresh ginger root, a hint of honey underneath. 25 years of mornings collapsed into a single breath. Margaret standing at the kitchen counter in her blue apron, the blender screaming while she hummed off-key. The smell of ginger clinging to her fingers when she handed me the glass. The way she always watched me take the first sip, waiting for the nod, the smile, the same words every time. Perfect, Margaret. Every single time. I lifted the thermos to my lips and drank. The flavor was almost right. Almost. There was a faint undercurrent I did not recognize. Something slightly more bitter than Margaret's version. A metallic sharpness buried beneath the sweetness like a wrong note in a familiar song. I paused. Nicole watched me. Her eyes held mine with an intensity that felt heavier than the moment warranted. Is it okay? She asked. I blamed the thermos. Stainless steel sometimes lent a metallic taste to drinks. I blamed the ginger, maybe a different variety. I blamed my own aging palate, dulled by years and grief. "It is wonderful," I said. "Thank you. Finish it," Nicole urged softly. "You will need the energy." There was something beneath her tone. Not quite insistence. Something more delicate and more deliberate. Like a hand pressing gently against the small of your back, guiding you toward a door you had not planned to walk through. But I was raised to trust family above all things. So I tilted the thermos back and drank until it was empty. Nicole watched me swallow the last drop. She nodded once, satisfied. We walked to the security checkpoint. My boarding pass was scanned. I turned to say goodbye. Nicole stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. The hug lasted longer than any she had given me before. Her grip was tight, almost urgent, her chin pressing into my shoulder. Her perfume was sharp and floral. "Have a safe trip, Dad," she whispered against my ear. A very safe trip. The words carried a weight of finality, as though she were not wishing me well but closing a chapter. I pulled back and searched her face. For a moment, something unguarded flickered across her expression, not sadness. A kind of grim resolve. Then the smile returned, seamless and practiced, and the moment dissolved. I turned and walked toward the gates. When I glanced back, Nicole was already moving toward the exit, her stride quick and purposeful. She did not look back. Gate B47. I found a seat near the window. Outside, planes taxied along the runways, wings catching the October sun. The mountains in the distance were crowned with fresh snow. My stomach felt warm from the smoothie. Comforting. Familiar. I closed my eyes and thought of Margaret. The cabin. The porch. The hummingbirds. The boarding announcement crackled overhead. I joined the line. Found seat. 14A. Window side. Buckled in. The engines surged. Denver fell away beneath us. The Rockies tilted. Massive and indifferent. Sunlight flooded the cabin. For 10 minutes, I felt nothing unusual. Then my tongue went dry. It happened without warning. One moment normal. The next, the saliva in my mouth simply vanished. I tried to swallow, but my throat resisted, constricted, the muscles refusing to cooperate. I reached for the water bottle in the seat pocket. My fingers brushed the plastic, then slipped away. They would not grip. The fine motor control in my hands had evaporated. I looked down. My fingers were trembling. Not the occasional tremor of age. Oh, a continuous, rapid vibration, as though a current were running through my tendons. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs. They did not stop. The metallic taste surged forward. No longer hidden beneath mango and ginger, it flooded my mouth with a bitter, chemical sharpness that coated my tongue and burned the back of my throat. My stomach clenched. Nausea rolled through me. Hot and sudden, my chest came next. The quiet pressure from that morning became a fist. It squeezed slowly, deliberately, tightening with each heartbeat. Each breath became shallower than the last, as though the available air were being rationed and I was being cut off. The cabin lights flared painfully bright. The businessman beside me became a smear of navy blue. The headrest in front warped and rippled. My vision fractured into shards of light and shadow. My heart hammered arrhythmically, slamming against my sternum in a pattern that made no medical sense. Nicole's face appeared in my mind. The thermos. The smile. The hug. A very safe trip, Dad. She had calculated everything. The timeline. The altitude. The distance from the ground when symptoms would hit. 37,000 feet. With nowhere to go. And no one who knew what was happening. I forced myself upward. One hand on the seat back, pulling against gravity and the dead weight of my failing body. The aisle stretched before me like a tunnel narrowing into darkness. I rose halfway. My knees held for one fragile second. Then they buckled. The aisle floor came up with hard, final certainty. My cheekbones struck the carpet. The impact cracked through my skull. The floor smelled of cleaning solution and recirculated air. Voices erupted. Distant, layered, panicked. "Sir, sir, are you all right?" Hands rolled me onto my back. The ceiling lights exploded into white supernovas, spinning above me. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then one voice. Calm. Commanding. Slicing through the chaos, like a scalpel. Everyone move back. "My name is Dr. Priya Sharma. I am an emergency physician." A hand found my wrist. Fingers pressed firmly against my pulse point. I opened my eyes. She was above me. Dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, black braid over one shoulder. No panic in her expression. Only focus. Pupils dilated, she said. Uneven response. Pulse 140 and irregular. Diaphoretic and cyanotic around the lips. She leaned closer. "Sir, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" I tried. "Walter. Walter Graves." The words formed in my mind but died between thought and speech. My lips moved without sound. Priya straightened and turned toward the cabin. Her voice carried the authority of a woman who had spoken over alarms and sirens and the sound of people dying. "I need someone to contact the cockpit immediately. This man needs emergency medical care on the ground. We cannot wait for Charlotte. This plane lands at the nearest available airport. Now." Dr. Priya Sharma had flown across the country to bury her mother. She had stood beside a grave in Kansas City the previous morning, holding a handful of marigolds, while a priest spoke words she could barely hear through the ringing in her ears. Her mother had been 68 years old. A retired school teacher, a woman who had immigrated from Gujarat at 22 with $11 and a degree in mathematics and had spent 46 years building a life in America, one small, stubborn decision at a time. Priya had not cried at the funeral. She had held her brother's hand and stared at the coffin and reminded herself that grief was a process, not a performance. She would grieve later, privately, in the way her mother had taught her, quietly and with dignity. Now, less than 24 hours later, she was kneeling on the floor of a commercial aircraft with a stranger's wrist between her fingers, watching his vital signs deteriorate in real time, and she was not going to let another person's parent die. Not today. His respiratory rate is dropping. She announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying the controlled urgency of someone accustomed to emergencies. "I need a first aid kit. Any medication on board. And I need this aircraft on the ground within 15 minutes. A flight attendant appeared beside her, pale-faced and clutching a white plastic box. Priya opened it without looking up. Bandages, antiseptic wipes, a blood pressure cuff that looked like it had not been calibrated in years. Nothing useful. Nothing that could counteract whatever was systematically shutting down the body of the man on the floor. The plane banked hard to the left. The captain's voice came through the overhead speakers, tight and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making an unscheduled stop in Wichita, Kansas, due to a medical emergency on board. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. 15 minutes. Priya counted them in heartbeats, mine and hers. Mine were erratic, skipping, stumbling over each other, like a drummer who had lost the rhythm. Hers were steady. I could feel them through her fingertips on my wrist, a metronome anchoring me to consciousness. I drifted in and out. The cabin lights pulsed. Faces appeared and disappeared above me. Priya's voice threaded through the darkness, constant and commanding. "Stay with me. Stay with me. You are not done yet." I wanted to tell her my name. I wanted to tell her about Margaret, about the cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains and the promise I had made, about Nicole and the smoothie, and the way she had watched me drink every drop with that practiced, empty smile. But my body had become a prison. My tongue was stone. My lungs were collapsing inward. All I could do was lie on that carpet and trust a stranger to keep me alive. The landing was violent, The wheels hit the tarmac hard enough to rattle the overhead bins. The brakes screamed. Passengers lurched forward against their seatbelts. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of flat Kansas landscape, stretching to the horizon under a pale October sky. Wichita. A city I had never visited and never planned to. A city that was about to save my life. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Paramedics appeared, 2 men in dark blue uniforms moving with practiced efficiency. They lifted me onto a stretcher, and the ceiling of the aircraft slid past above me, row after row of overhead compartments, until daylight hit my face and I was outside. The sky enormous and white above the tarmac. Priya walked beside the stretcher, one hand still on my wrist. She was speaking rapidly to the paramedics, medical terminology flowing in a stream I could barely follow. Tachycardic. Hypotensive. Suspected chemical ingestion. No known cardiac history. Onset. Approximately 25 minutes post-consumption of an unverified beverage. An ambulance waited on the tarmac. They loaded me inside. The doors closed, and the siren began. A sound I had heard thousands of times in my life, but never from the inside. The vehicle moved. Priya sat beside me, adjusting an oxygen mask over my nose and mouth. The air tasted clean and faintly metallic. "You are going to be fine," she said. Whether she believed it or was simply performing the ritual of reassurance, I could not tell. But her hand remained steady on my wrist, and that was enough. The clinic was small. I understood that before I opened my eyes. The room smelled of disinfectant and old paper. No monitors beeping. No rolling carts. Just stillness. A narrow bed with stiff white sheets. A wooden chair near a thin window. A dented metal cabinet marked with a faded red cross. Through the window, a quiet street. A hardware store with a sun-bleached sign. A diner with a cracked parking lot. A single traffic light swaying gently in the Kansas wind. Wichita, a town that existed at the edge of attention. The kind of place people pass through without remembering. When I tried to sit up, my body resisted. My muscles felt weighted, as though sand had been poured into my limbs. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. My mouth tasted dry and metallic. But beneath the physical weakness, something else had returned. Clarity. My thoughts were sharp, cleaner than they had been in hours. ESC. The voice came from the doorway. Priya leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Her black braid was slightly disheveled now. Dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond this emergency. The kind of exhaustion that accumulates over days of grief and sleeplessness and holding yourself together for everyone else. "How are you feeling?" she asked, crossing the room. "Like I was thrown from a moving vehicle," I said. My voice scraped against my throat, but it held. One corner of her mouth twitched. "That means you are coherent. Good sign." She pulled the wooden chair closer and sat down. For a few seconds, she simply studied me. I could see questions lining up behind her gaze, organizing themselves into clinical categories. "What happened to me?" I asked. She inhaled slowly. "You presented with symptoms consistent with acute chemical exposure. Dilated pupils, irregular cardiac rhythm, profuse diaphoresis, rapid loss of motor coordination, respiratory depression. Your blood pressure dropped to dangerous levels during the flight." She paused, her eyes sharpened. "It was not a heart attack, Mr. Graves. It was not a stroke. It was not an allergic reaction. Your body responded to something it ingested, something it was not designed to process." The word formed silently in my mind. Poison. "I contacted the emergency room at Denver General," she continued. "I described your symptoms to a colleague. He agreed with my assessment. Given your age and otherwise excellent health, there is no organic explanation for what happened." She leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped. "Mr. Graves, who gave you that smoothie?" I looked past her, through the narrow window, At the quiet street and the swaying traffic light, a delivery truck rolled past. A bird hopped along the curb. Ordinary life, continuing without interruption. My stepdaughter, I said quietly. The girl I raised since she was 10. Priya held my gaze for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. The recognition of someone who understood that the people closest to you could also be the most dangerous. I buried my mother yesterday, she said softly. In Kansas City, 68 years old. I flew across this country to say goodbye to the woman who gave me everything. She paused. I am not going to watch someone else's parent be taken from them. Not like this. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the clinic's heating system and the distant sound of the Kansas wind pressing against the windows. I looked at Dr. Priya Sharma, this stranger who had pulled me back from the edge, and I understood that whatever happened next, the first decision I made would determine everything. There are two kinds of responses when someone tries to end your life. The first is instinct. Call the police. File a report. Let the system do what systems are designed to do. It is the logical response, the civilized response. The response I would have recommended from the bench to any victim who sat before me during my 30 years as a federal judge. The second response is silence, patience, strategy. It is the response of someone who has watched that system fail more times than he can count. You need to contact the police, Priya said. She stood beside the window now, arms crossed, her tone shifting from doctor to conscience. And your family. Your son, at the very least. No, I said. The word landed between us with more weight than I intended. Priya's brow furrowed. She studied me the way she had studied my pupils on the airplane floor, searching for signs of impairment. Mr. Graves, you were poisoned. This is not a decision you make alone. It is exactly a decision I make alone. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. Pain flared briefly behind my eyes. My body protested, but I could stand. Slowly, carefully. If I call the police now, what happens? I tell them my stepdaughter put something in a smoothie at Denver International Airport. They ask for evidence. I have none. No toxicology report. No witnesses who saw her add anything. No surveillance footage that I know of. I paused, letting the logic build. Nicole will deny everything. She will say I was confused. She will say I am 71 years old, grieving, under stress, possibly showing early signs of cognitive decline. And do you know what happens then? The police take notes, open a file, and the investigation stalls. Meanwhile, Nicole knows I suspect her. She adjusts. She covers her tracks. She becomes careful in ways I cannot anticipate. Priya said nothing. Her jaw tightened, but she did not interrupt. I have spent 30 years on the federal bench, I continued quietly. I have seen hundreds of cases collapse because victims moved too fast. They reacted before they had evidence. They trusted the system to compensate for what they could not prove. The system does not compensate. The system requires proof. And right now, I have nothing but a metallic taste in my mouth and a body that almost stopped working at 37,000 feet. The clinic room was silent except for the faint rattle of the window against the Kansas wind. Priya leaned against the wall, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. This is a terrible idea, she said finally. I know. You could be in serious danger. I know that too. You are asking me to release a poisoning victim without reporting it. I'm asking you to give me time. I met her gaze steadily. A few days. That is all. She held my stare for a long moment. Then she exhaled through her nose, frustration flickering across her face. She reached into the borrowed lab coat she wore and pulled out a business card. She placed it on the bedside table. Dr. Priya Sharma, Emergency Medicine, Denver General Hospital. A phone number was written on the back in blue ink. If anything happens, she said. Anything at all, you call me. I will. She hesitated at the door, as if considering whether to say more. Her eyes carried the weight of someone who had spent the last 48 hours burying her mother and saving a stranger, and was running on nothing but adrenaline and principle. "Be careful, Mr. Graves," she said quietly. "Whoever did this to you was not impulsive. They planned it. That makes them more dangerous than you think." Then she left. Her footsteps faded down the corridor. The clinic fell into silence. I waited until I was certain she was gone before pulling my phone from my jacket pocket. The screen lit up. No missed calls from Nicole. No messages. No attempt to reach me whatsoever. Interesting. A woman who had driven her stepfather to the airport, bought him a drink, and watched his plane depart had not once checked to see if he had arrived safely. That absence of concern was its own kind of evidence. I scrolled to a name I had not called in months. Frank Delgado. My oldest friend. Former chief of police for the city and county of Denver. 35 years on the force before retirement. The most disciplined mind I knew. The only person I trusted without hesitation. He picked up on the second ring. Walter. His voice came through warm and graveled. The voice of a man who had spent decades giving orders in rooms full of chaos. "I thought you were on a plane to Asheville. I need your help, Frank," I said, cutting him off. My voice was calmer than I felt. "And I need you to keep this between us." Silence followed. Not confused. Calculating. I could picture him in my mind, sitting on the porch of his ranch in Durango, watching the sun drop behind the San Juan Mountains, eyes narrowing as he processed variables. Frank Delgado did not panic. He assessed. "What happened?" he asked. I told him everything. The smoothie. Nicole's appearance at my house that morning. The metallic taste. The numbness spreading through my limbs. The collapse. Priya. The clinic in Wichita. And when I finished, the line remained quiet for several seconds. "Jesus." "Walter." Frank breathed. His voice was tight, anger pressing through the restraint. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure. I am sure. But why? Why would she do this?" That one. That was. That was. The cabin is worth $1.9 million. The life insurance policy is $3.2 million, and I am worth more gone than I am alive. Frank swore under his breath. A string of curses in English and Spanish that I had not heard from him since our early days when investigations went sideways and evidence disappeared. "Where are you now?" he asked. "Wichita." "A clinic off the main road." "I am not going home, Frank. That landed heavily between us. What are you planning?" he asked carefully. I stood and crossed to the window. The Kansas sky was enormous and empty, stretching in every direction without obstruction. The traffic lights swayed. A dog trotted along the sidewalk. Unhurried. Oblivious. Normal life. Continuing. "If I go home now," I said, "if I alert anyone, Nicole will know I survived. She will know I suspect her. She will adjust, destroy evidence, construct a defense, and the next time, she will not make mistakes. So what is the alternative?" "I disappear," I said. "For real. Let her think she succeeded. Let her believe I am gone." Frank exhaled slowly. "And then what?" "And then I watch. I gather evidence. I find out who else is involved. And when I have enough, I come back." Silence again. Not disbelief. Consideration. "My ranch in Durango," he said finally. "No neighbors within 2 miles. No public Wi-Fi. No digital footprint. I can be in Wichita by midnight." I felt something loosen in my chest. The first real breath I had taken since the airplane floor. "But Walter," Frank continued, his voice dropping low and steady, "if we do this, we do it my way. I spent 35 years building cases that held up in courtrooms. We are not going to cut corners. We are not going to break laws we cannot justify. And we are not going to blow this because of emotion." I looked at my reflection in the window glass. A 71-year-old man. Gray hair. Lines carved deep by loss. The man, Nicole, thought she had eliminated. That man was gone now. He had collapsed on an airplane floor and almost never stood up again. What remained was something quieter, colder, more deliberate. Understood, I said. Midnight. Frank repeated. Do not call anyone else. The line disconnected. I set the phone down and stood alone in the dim clinic room, listening to the Kansas wind press against the walls. Somewhere in Denver, Nicole was likely sitting in my house, drinking wine, waiting for news that would never come in the form she expected. She wanted me erased. She would get her wish. Walter Graves would disappear, but I would not stay gone. Frank arrived at 11:43. No headlights. No phone call. Just the low rumble of a silver pickup truck pulling into the clinic parking lot. Engine cutting to silence, and a door closing with the quiet discipline of a man who had spent 35 years approaching situations without announcing himself. I was waiting by the side entrance, bag packed, lights off. He stepped out, looked at me once. A quick visual sweep from head to toe. Then he nodded. You look like hell, he said. I feel worse. Good. Means you are alive to feel it. Get in. The drive west was nearly silent. We took back roads for the first 60 miles, avoiding the interstate. Frank drove the way he did everything, precisely, without excess. His eyes moved constantly between the road, the mirrors, and the darkness beyond. I watched the landscape transform as we crossed into Colorado. Flatlands gave way to foothills, then to steeper inclines, thick with pine. The air changed, cooler, drier, carrying the clean bite of altitude. We turned onto a gravel road shortly after 3 in the morning. Ponderosa pines crowded the path, their trunks silver in the headlights. The smell of pine sap and cold earth seeped through the vents. The trees opened into a clearing, and the cabin appeared. Single story. Stone chimney. Covered porch. No neighbors. No streetlights. No sound except whined through the pines. Inside, the logs caught quickly, flames snapping warmth into the mountain air. The scent of burning pine filled the room. Frank set his laptop on the table and opened it. Blue light sharpened the angles of his face. When you installed your home security system, he said without looking up. Who handled the back end? Garrett Technologies. Full integration. Cameras, smart locks, thermostat, lighting, speakers. The aromatherapy diffuser Margaret used for her lavender oil. Everything runs through a central hub. Did you ever share access with Nicole? No. James had emergency access. Nicole never asked. Good. Because the system has a maintenance back door. Standard in these installations. Most homeowners never know it exists. He paused. I do. 3 minutes of silence, fire crackling, wind against the walls. Then Frank leaned back. I am in. I stood behind him. The screen displayed a grid of live camera feeds. My house. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Master bedroom. Slightly grainy, but perfectly clear. Full control? I asked. Cameras. Locks. Thermostat. Lighting. Speakers. Diffuser. Alarm system. Frank listed. She thinks she owns the environment. She does not. I studied the feeds. The living room lamp glowed beside the sofa. The kitchen was dark. The hallway nightlight flickered near the staircase. My house, still and quiet, as though nothing had changed. Frank expanded the living room feed to full screen. Nicole was there. She sat on my couch, legs crossed, a glass of red wine in her hand. Relaxed, comfortable, settled into my furniture as though it had always been hers. Across from her, in the armchair Margaret and I had picked out together at an antique store in Boulder 20 years ago, sat a man I had never seen. Early 40s. Lean build. Dark hair cut short. Charcoal sweater. Slim trousers. His posture projected a specific kind of confidence, the kind that comes from believing you are the smartest person in any room. He held a glass of whiskey. My whiskey. From the cabinet beside the fireplace. They were talking. Smiling. Nicole laughed, a genuine laugh, not the practiced one she wore for family. This was Nicole without performance. Nicole with her guard completely down. My jaw tightened. "Zoom in on him," I said. Frank captured a still frame and ran facial recognition through a database he had retained access to from his years on the force. The program processed for several seconds. Aaron Blackwell. Frank read aloud. Age 42. Financial advisor. Based in Portland, Oregon. Licensed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Multiple client complaints over the past 6 years. Conflict of interest allegations. Questionable investment practices. Nothing proven. A financial advisor. In my house. Drinking my whiskey. Sitting in Margaret's chair. He is not just her boyfriend, I said quietly. Frank nodded. Then he scrolled further through the database. His expression changed. The professional calm shifted into something harder. "Walter," he said. His voice had dropped. "This name, Aaron Blackwell. I have seen it before." I looked at him. "Gerald Whitmore," Frank said. 4 years ago. My last major case before retirement. Whitmore was 68. Retired engineer. Wealthy. Blackwell was his financial advisor. Whitmore died at home. Cardiac arrest. Natural causes, they said. He turned the screen toward me. A case file photograph showed an elderly man with kind eyes and silver hair. Gerald Whitmore. Deceased. The investigation was closed, Frank continued. Insufficient evidence. But Blackwell inherited $200,000 from Whitmore's estate. A financial advisor inheriting from a client. I flagged it. My supervisors overruled me. The fire popped sharply. Sparks spiraled up the chimney. "This is not Nicole acting alone," Frank said. "This is his pattern. She might be the weapon, but Blackwell is the architect." I stared at the screen. Nicole and Aaron, laughing in my living room, drinking my wine and my whiskey, sitting in chairs Margaret had chosen. They believed I was gone. They believed the story was finished. "We are not just fighting Nicole anymore," I said. Frank met my eyes. Firelight cast deep shadows across his face. "No," he said. "We might be looking at something much worse." Nicole discovered that I was missing exactly 40 hours after she handed me that smoothie. I know the precise timing because Frank had been logging everything. Timestamps. Calls. Door sensors. Every digital footprint that passed through my house. She had not seemed concerned the day before. She had ordered groceries online. She had spent 40 minutes on a video call with a client in Boulder. She had poured herself wine at 4:15 in the afternoon and sat on the porch scrolling through her phone. Patient. Unhurried. The behavior of someone who already knew the outcome and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. But by late afternoon on the second day, something shifted. "There," Frank said quietly, leaning toward the screen. Nicole paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear. She was trying someone. No answer. She ended the call, tried again. Still nothing. Then she dialed the airline. "Yes, hello. I need to check on a passenger. My father was on flight 2719 from Denver to Charlotte, connecting to Asheville. He departed 2 days ago and never arrived at his destination." Her voice was steady, but threaded with concern. Perfectly calibrated. The airline representative asked questions. Nicole answered each one clearly, providing the booking reference, my full name, my seat number. She listened. She thanked them. She hung up. Then she called James. Jamie. Her voice trembled instantly. The shift was so fast, so seamless, that if I had not been watching her face on camera, I would have believed the emotion was real. Jamie, I do not know how to say this, but your father, he never arrived in Asheville. I have been trying to reach him. He is not answering his phone. Through the speaker, James's voice came faintly, confused first, then escalating. What do you mean he never arrived? I mean he got on the plane and never showed up. I called the airline. They confirmed he boarded in Denver, but he was not on the connecting flight from Charlotte. Jamie, I think something is wrong. James's panic was real. I could hear it in the pitch of his voice, in the rapid questions he fired. Had she called hospitals? Had she checked his phone? Had she contacted anyone in Asheville? Nicole answered each question with measured distress. She let her voice crack on the right words. She paused at the right moments. She was performing grief the way a concert pianist performs a concerto. Technically flawless, emotionally precise, and entirely rehearsed. I am booking a flight home right now, James said. Do not do anything until I get there. Should I call the police? Nicole asked. Yes. Call them now. I will be there by tonight. She ended the call. For 3 full seconds, she stood motionless in the kitchen, staring at the phone in her hand. No tears, no trembling, just stillness. Then she dialed again. Because the disappearance involved a commercial flight crossing state lines, the case was flagged for federal jurisdiction. FBI agent Maria Santos was assigned within hours. Frank and I watched through the doorbell camera as she arrived at my house the following morning. Santos was not what I expected. She was small, 5'4" at most, with cropped dark hair and sharp brown eyes that moved across every surface, as though cataloging evidence in real time. She wore a navy blazer over a white shirt, no jewelry, no unnecessary detail. Everything about her projected efficiency. Nicole opened the door with impeccable timing, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders slightly slumped, a tissue clutched in her left hand. Thank you for coming, she said, voice fragile. I am so worried about him. Santos stepped inside without responding to the emotion. She simply nodded and moved to the living room. She sat in the armchair, the same armchair where Aaron Blackwell had been drinking my whiskey 2 nights ago, and opened a leather notebook. Walk me through the morning your father left, Santos said. No warmth, no sympathy, just precision. Nicole sat on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She began recounting the morning, the drive to the airport, the smoothie she had made, the goodbye at the security checkpoint. Every detail delivered cleanly, without hesitation. She had rehearsed this. He seemed tired, Nicole offered. A little confused, maybe. He has been forgetful lately. Nothing serious, but small things. Leaving lights on. Missing appointments. I felt anger flare in my chest. She was planting seeds. Building the foundation for a narrative in which I was an aging man losing his faculties. A man who might wander off. A man whose disappearance could be explained by decline rather than design. Santos wrote steadily, her pen never pausing. What about his phone? Santos asked. He left it at the house, Nicole said. I found it on the kitchen counter the next morning. Santos looked up. He left his phone behind before a cross-country trip. He has done it before, Nicole said quickly. He forgets things. Mr. Graves was a federal judge for 30 years, Santos said evenly. He ran complex trials involving hundreds of exhibits and thousands of pages of testimony. Is forgetfulness consistent with that background? Silence. Nicole's fingers tightened in her lap. A flicker of something crossed her face. Too fast to name. The grief, Nicole whispered. After Margaret, it changed him. Santos held her gaze for a moment longer than comfortable. Then she returned to her notebook. The interview continued for another 15 minutes. Nicole answered every question. Santos wrote every answer. When it was finished, Santos stood. If you recall anything else, contact me directly. She placed her card on the coffee table. Nicole walked her to the door. Santos paused on the threshold. One more question, Mrs. Graves. Since your father's disappearance, has anything unusual occurred in the home? Anything at all? Nicole's color drained. For one unguarded second, something raw and frightened surfaced behind her eyes. No, she whispered. Nothing. Santos studied her face. Then she offered a professional nod and stepped outside. The door closed. Nicole locked it. She stood still for several seconds, breathing. Then she pulled out her phone. The call connected in 2 rings. Her voice changed completely. Gone was the tremor. Gone was the grief. What remained was flat, controlled, and cold. It is done, she said. The FBI came. They asked questions. I answered everything. He is gone, Aaron. They will not find anything. A pause. Aaron's voice responded faintly. I know, Nicole continued. Just give it time. The insurance will start processing within 6 months if they do not recover a body. We just need to be patient. Another pause. Relax, she added. A short, sharp laugh escaped her. The old man is out of the picture. No one suspects a thing. She ended the call and walked upstairs. The living room camera held the empty space where she had been standing. The tissue she had been clutching during the interview lay crumpled on the coffee table beside Santos's card. Prop discarded after the performance. At the ranch, Frank muted the audio. We sat in silence. The fire crackled softly. She is good, Frank said. Yes, I replied. She is. But Santa's is better. I looked at him. Frank pulled up a second feed. The doorbell camera. Time stamped 8 minutes after Santos had left. The agent sat in her car, parked at the curb, engine off. She had not driven away. She was writing in her notebook, pen moving in quick, deliberate strokes. Frank zoomed in. The resolution was not sharp enough to read the words, but the image was clear enough to see Santos's expression. Focused, skeptical, the expression of a woman who had listened carefully and believed almost nothing. She closed the notebook, started the engine, and pulled away. She will be back, Frank said. Yes, I agreed. She will. 3 days after I vanished, I sent Nicole the first message. It was not a letter. It was not a threat. It was a single white orchid, placed on the kitchen counter beside the coffee machine, exactly where Margaret used to set her reading glasses every morning before breakfast. Margaret had carried white orchids on our wedding day. Not roses, not lilies, orchids. She had chosen them deliberately, the way she chose everything, with intention and meaning. White orchids, she told me that evening as we danced beneath the string lights in her parents' backyard, represent pure truth. That is what I want this marriage built on, Walter. Truth, even when it is difficult. Especially when it is difficult. For 34 years, I brought her white orchids on every anniversary. They sat on our nightstand in a crystal vase, their petals catching the morning light. When the Alzheimer's took her ability to remember our anniversary, I brought them anyway. When she could no longer remember my name, I placed them beside her bed at the care facility and told her they meant something important. She would touch the petals with trembling fingers and smile, not because she remembered, but because beauty does not require memory to be felt. Nicole knew this. She had been there for every orchid, every anniversary, every gentle reminder of what those flowers represented. She had watched Margaret touch the petals. She had heard the story of our wedding day more times than she could count. She knew exactly what a white orchid in that kitchen would mean, and that was precisely why I chose it. Magda placed the flower at 6 in the morning. My housekeeper of 20 years, a sturdy woman from Krakow with iron-gray hair and hands that had scrubbed every surface of that house since before Nicole ever set foot in it. I had sent Magda an encrypted message through a secure application Frank had configured. Simple instructions. Place 1 white orchid on the kitchen counter beside the coffee machine at 6 a.m. Tell no one. Ask no questions. Magda did not hesitate. She had held Margaret's hand during the final weeks. She had washed the sheets after Margaret passed. She had stood beside me at the funeral and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. Trust like that is earned over decades and spent in seconds. I spent it without guilt. From the ranch, Frank and I watched the kitchen camera feed. The orchid sat on the dark granite counter, luminous and still, its white petals almost glowing against the stone. A small thing, a beautiful thing. A grenade with the pin already pulled. Nicole entered the kitchen at 7:12. Bathrobe loosely tied, hair pulled back. Still half asleep. She took 3 steps into the room, reached for the cabinet where the coffee mugs were kept, and stopped. Her hand froze midair. Her eyes locked onto the counter. For 10 full seconds, she did not move. I counted them. 10 seconds of absolute stillness. Her body rigid, her breathing suspended. Then she crossed the room slowly, almost cautiously. The way you approach something you suspect might be alive. She picked up the orchid, turned it over in her hands, held it close to her face as if examining something fragile and dangerous simultaneously. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she moved. Fast. She checked the back door. Locked. The windows. Locked. The front door. Locked. The garage entry. Locked. She walked through every room on the ground floor, opening closets, checking behind furniture, scanning corners. Nothing. No one. The house was empty except for her and a single white flower. She returned to the kitchen and called Magda. Her voice was controlled but tight. Magda. Did you come to the house this morning? A pause. Magda's voice came through calm and mildly confused. No, Mrs. Graves. I am not scheduled until Thursday. Is everything all right? Did you leave something on the counter? A flower? A flower? No. I have not been there since last week. Nicole's fingers tightened around the stem. The petals bent slightly under the pressure. You are sure? Quite sure. Is something wrong? No. Nicole said quickly. No. Thank you. Everything is fine. She ended the call. Stood alone in the kitchen. Stared at the orchid. Then she called Aaron. There is an orchid, she said. Her voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. A white orchid. On the kitchen counter. The kind Ambrose used to buy for Margaret. Aaron's voice came through faint but audible. Maybe James brought it. James is at his office. And he would not know about the orchids. He was never sentimental about those things. Then maybe the housekeeper forgot she came by. All the doors are locked, Aaron. Every window. No one has been inside this house except me. A pause. You are exhausted, Aaron said carefully. You have not been sleeping. Maybe you picked it up somewhere yesterday and forgot. I did not forget. Her voice sharpened. I did not buy this. I did not bring this in. Someone put it here. Another pause. Longer this time. Then throw it away, Aaron said finally. And stop thinking about it. Nicole ended the call without another word. She walked to the trash can, lifted the lid, held the orchid above the opening. Her hand trembled. The petals quivered. She dropped it in. The lid closed with a soft thud, but she did not walk away. She stood beside the trash can for nearly a minute, staring at the closed lid as though the flower might push it open. Then she turned and left the kitchen, arms wrapped tightly around herself. That night, at 11:47, Frank sent the message. A masked number routed through 3 different servers, untraceable. 5 words delivered to Nicole's phone as she lay in bed, lights on, staring at the ceiling. Do you remember what orchids meant to her? The notification sound was barely audible through the bedroom camera, but Nicole's reaction was not subtle. She flinched as though struck. She grabbed the phone, read the screen. Her face drained white. She sat upright, looked toward the closet, the door, the bathroom. Nothing. Silence. The house held its breath. She did not reply. She locked the phone, placed it face down on the nightstand, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room, but her eyes stayed open, wide, unblinking, staring into the blackness above her. Through the night vision feed, I watched her lie motionless for hours, listening to every creak of settling wood, every whisper of wind against the windows. She did not sleep. For the first time since I had disappeared, Nicole's fear was not performed. It was real. At the ranch, I leaned back from the screen. The fire had burned down to embers. Frank sat beside me, arms crossed, watching the feed with the patient stillness of a man who had conducted hundreds of stakeouts. "Fear has entered the house," he said quietly. "Once it gets in, it does not leave." I looked at the screen. Nicole, pale and rigid beneath the blankets, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Good," I replied, "because I am just getting started." 1 week after I disappeared, Nicole heard Margaret for the first time. Not her voice. Her music. Clair de Lune by Debussy, played on a piano that no one was touching, drifting through the house at 2:17 in the morning like smoke from a fire that had been extinguished years ago. Margaret had played that piece every evening after dinner for as long as I had known her. It was her ritual, her closing prayer. She would sit at the upright piano in the living room, close her eyes, and let her fingers find the opening notes from memory. The melody would fill the house slowly, moving through hallways and up staircases, settling into corners like dust. I would sit in the kitchen with my coffee and listen. And for those 4 minutes, the world outside ceased to exist. Nicole had heard it 1,000 times. She had grown up with that melody the way some children grow up with lullabies. She had sat on the living room floor as a teenager doing homework while Margaret played. She had stood in the doorway during the final years, watching Margaret's fingers stumble and fail, watching the music disappear note by note until silence was all that remained. That music was Margaret. And now it was moving through the house again at 2 in the morning, and Margaret was 2 years dead. Frank triggered the smart speakers at precisely 2:17. He had uploaded a high-quality recording of Clair de Lune performed on an upright piano, the same model as ours. The speakers in the living room activated at low volume, just loud enough to penetrate sleep, just soft enough to make you question whether you were dreaming. On the bedroom camera, Nicole's eyes snapped open. She lay still for several seconds, staring at the ceiling, her body rigid beneath the blankets. Listening, the melody floated up the staircase, faint and unmistakable. Her breathing changed, shallow, rapid. The pulse at her throat fluttered visibly. She sat up slowly. Aaron lay beside her, asleep, undisturbed. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed and stood. She walked to the bedroom door, opened it, and stood in the hallway. The music was clearer here, drifting from the living room below. Delicate, patient, exactly as Margaret had played it. Nicole descended the stairs 1 step at a time, her hand gripping the railing. She reached the living room. The piano sat in its corner beneath its thin layer of dust. The keys were untouched. The smart speaker Dias showed no dias, no indicator of activity. But the music continued, rising and falling in the familiar pattern that had defined 10,000 evenings in this house. She crossed the room and picked up the speaker, turned it over, pressed every button. The music stopped. She stood in silence, holding the device, breathing hard. "She thinks she imagined it," Frank murmured beside me. "She did not," I replied. Nicole placed the speaker back on the shelf. She checked the piano, ran her fingers across the dusty keys as though expecting them to be warm. They were not. She returned upstairs, climbed back into bed, and pulled the blanket over herself. She lay on her back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The second night, Frank accessed the digital photo frame mounted on the hallway wall. It normally cycled through a curated selection of family photographs, landscapes, holidays, birthdays. At 1:45 in the morning, every image was replaced with photographs of Margaret. Only Margaret. Margaret on our wedding day with orchids in her hair. Margaret on the cabin porch in Blue Ridge. Margaret teaching her third-grade class. Margaret holding baby James. Margaret and Nicole in the garden. Nicole at 12. Both of them laughing. Dirt on their hands. The frame cycled through the images slowly, each one lingering for 10 seconds before dissolving into the next. A slideshow of a woman who was gone, playing silently in the dark hallway outside the bedroom where Nicole was trying to sleep. Nicole discovered it at 2:20 when she got up to use the bathroom. She stopped in the hallway, the blue glow of the frame illuminating her face. She stared at the images as they changed. Margaret smiling, Margaret laughing, Margaret holding Nicole's hand. She ripped the power cord from the wall. The frame went dark. She stood in the hallway holding the cord, chest heaving, and did not move for nearly a minute. The third night was the one that broke her. At 3 in the morning, Frank activated the aromatherapy diffuser in the master bedroom. It was the unit Margaret had used for her lavender oil, built into the climate system, connected to the smart home hub. Frank had loaded a different scent profile, not Leonda, Ginger, and Mango. The mist dispersed silently through the bedroom vents, invisible and unavoidable. The scent spread slowly, filling the room the way warmth fills a house when the heating kicks on. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Nicole woke with a gasp. She sat upright, nostrils flaring, her face contorted in confusion that rapidly shifted to recognition. Then, to horror. She knew that smell. She had blended it herself. She had poured it into a thermos and carried it to Denver International Airport and handed it to me with a smile. She had watched me drink every drop while that scent hung in the air between us, sweet and sharp. Now it was here, in the bedroom, at 3 in the morning, and there was no thermos, no blender, no logical explanation for why the air in her dead stepfather's house smelled exactly like the weapon she had used to try to end his life. Nicole threw off the blankets and stumbled to the center of the room. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, the scent swirling around her like an accusation she could not escape. Tears streamed down her face. Her body shook. "It is him," she whispered. "He is here. He knows what I did." Aaron woke, groggy and disoriented. "What are you talking about?" "Smell it," she said, her voice cracking. "Smell the air. It is the smoothie. It is ginger and mango. It is his." Aaron inhaled. His face shifted. He smelled it too. "That is the house," he said carefully. "Old vents. Residual scent. It does not mean anything. It means everything." Nicole turned to face him, eyes red and swollen, tears cutting tracks down her cheeks. "Then explain the music. Explain the photographs. Explain why this house smells like the thing I used to." She stopped. The word hung in the air between them. Unfinished, but understood. Aaron stared at her. Nicole stared back. Neither of them spoke. At the ranch, Frank paused the audio feed. The cabin was quiet except for the fire's soft crackle. "She almost said it," he murmured. "Almost confessed. Right there." I stared at the screen. Nicole standing in the center of the bedroom, tears on her face, the scent of mango and ginger surrounding her like a ghost she could not outrun. "Almost is not enough," I said. "We need more." The invitation arrived Tuesday morning. Daniel's name glowed on Victor's phone. A group text. Sloan had organized a family brunch at their Tybee Island rental Sunday. 11 o'clock. Casual dress. She signed it with a heart emoji and 5 words. "Can't wait to celebrate together." Victor read it 3 times. Then, called Hank Morrison. "She's accelerating," Hank said. "This brunch is not a brunch. It's a stage. What do you recommend?" "Go. But go prepared." By Wednesday, Hank had arranged everything. a lapel pin recorder, an encrypted backup phone, a sterile glass vial for collecting food samples. He demonstrated each item on Victor's kitchen counter, his thick fingers surprisingly gentle. Don't eat anything she prepares. If she hands you a glass, hold it. Raise it. Touch it to your lips. But do not swallow. Victor nodded. Hank placed a business card beside the vial. Dr. Sarah Chen, toxicology specialist, Memorial Health. She's expecting a possible emergency call Sunday afternoon. Saturday night, Victor stood in the master bedroom, facing Catherine's photograph. Silver frame. Soft lamplight. That patient smile. I'm going into their house tomorrow, he said quietly. I know what she's planning. But Daniel will be there, and I cannot protect him from a distance. He paused. Keep my hand steady, Catherine. The Tybee Island house sat 3 blocks from the beach. White clapboard, blue shutters, wind chimes on the porch. It looked like a postcard. It felt like a trap. Victor parked at 10:47. Thomas pulled in behind him, jaw tight. Their agreement was simple. Thomas watches, listens, says nothing, unless spoken to. A witness. Daniel opened the door before they reached the steps. Linen shirt, rolled sleeves, an expression balanced between politeness and unresolved anger. Dad. No hug. Son. Victor placed his hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary, fresh bread, and citrus. Sloane had set the table with white linen, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of magnolias, Catherine's favorite flower. The detail was deliberate. Victor recognized, Victor! Sloane emerged carrying a pitcher of orange juice. Her smile was wide and perfectly rehearsed. I made Catherine's lemon rosemary chicken. Daniel found the recipe in her journal. The name landed like a blade. That's very thoughtful, Sloane. Bryce Callahan sat at the far end, holding sweet tea. Posture relaxed. He nodded at Victor, like a chess player acknowledging an opponent. Carl Jessup stood near the back door, introduced as Bryce's college friend from Florida. 6 at the table. 3 enemies. 2 allies. Daniel in the middle, unaware. Sloane served each plate herself. She poured Victor's juice from the shared pitcher, but lingered half a second longer on his glass. Victor caught it. Thomas caught it. Conversation drifted across safe ground. Daniel's architecture job offer. Thomas's boat project. Summer weather. Bryce contributed polished sentences. Carl watched exits. Victor raised his glass twice. Both times it touched his lips. Both times he set it down without drinking. The lapel pin captured every word. 20 minutes in, Sloane refilled glasses. She moved behind Victor, reached across his shoulder, poured. Jasmine perfume drifted past. You've barely touched your juice, Victor. Saving room. The chicken is too good to rush. She laughed and returned to her seat. At 12:15, Victor excused himself. In the locked bathroom, he transferred a juice sample from the small sealed cup beneath his napkin into Hank's sterile vial. His hands did not shake. He returned and finished the performance, complimenting food, asking Daniel about work, shaking Bryce's hand at the door. Every gesture cost him something. In the car, Thomas exhaled hard. She watched you the entire meal. Every time you raised that glass, her eyes locked on your mouth. Victor placed the vial into Hank's insulated case. I know. He drove to Memorial Health. Dr. Sarah Chen met him at the staff entrance. Small, sharp-eyed, lab coat 2 sizes too large. She took the vial, labeled it, promised 4 hours. The call came at 6:41 p.m. Mr. Manning. The orange juice contains warfarin at approximately 9 times therapeutic dose. I also found trace potassium chloride. Combined with the warfarin already in your system, 1 full glass would have caused cardiac arrest within 6 to 12 hours. You would not have survived the night. Victor sat in the parked Lincoln outside his estate. Dark oaks, motionless moss, perfect stillness. Thank you, Dr. Chen. This is attempted murder. I'm required to report it. My attorney Henry Aldridge will contact you within the hour. He hung up. 1 glass of orange juice. That was the distance between life and death poured by a woman his son loved, in a house decorated with his dead wife's flowers, cooked from his dead wife's recipe. His phone buzzed. Daniel's text. "Thanks for coming today, Dad. It meant a lot. Maybe we can talk this week?" Victor wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and typed slowly. "Anytime, son. I'm here." He called Hank. "Lab confirmation. Warfarin and potassium chloride. Dr. Chen is filing." 3 seconds of silence. Then, Phase 2 begins now. "I'll brief Henry tonight. Tomorrow we loop in Detective Amanda Park. From here, every move builds toward arrest." Victor walked into the dark house. Catherine's portrait watched from the hallway wall. He climbed the stairs, sat on the bed's edge. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, detectives, the machinery of justice. Tonight there was only silence and the weight of knowing what love required. His son was still inside that woman's reach. But Daniel's text, "Maybe we can talk this week," meant that somewhere beneath the anger, beneath Sloane's grip, his boy was reaching back. Victor would not waste that. The footage arrived on a Tuesday. Frank had been running facial recognition sweeps for 9 days straight, cross-referencing airport security cameras, ATM feeds near the house, and traffic cameras along Nicole's known routes. Most of it was noise, grocery runs, gas stations, the same silver Audi pulling into the same driveway at the same predictable hours. Nicole lived her life like a woman who believed she had gotten away with murder. Then Frank found it. "Walter." His voice was different. Not the usual gravel-dry calm. Something tighter. "Come here." I set down my coffee. Real coffee. Black. From a tin can Frank kept above the refrigerator and crossed the cabin to his desk. The laptop screen showed a split feed. Left side. The parking garage. At Denver International Airport. Level 3. Section C. Right side. A timestamp. October 4th. 6:47 a.m. The morning I almost died. "Watch," Frank said. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A silver Audi entered the garage at 6:32 a.m. Nicole stepped out, passenger side. She walked to the trunk, opened it, and removed a small cooler bag, the kind you'd pack a child's lunch in. She unzipped it, took out a stainless steel thermos, and held it with both hands. For 11 seconds, she stood completely still, not checking her phone, not adjusting her hair, just holding the thermos and staring at it, the way someone might hold a grenade they'd already pulled the pin from. Then Aaron Blackwell stepped out of the driver's side. I leaned closer. The resolution sharpened as Frank adjusted the contrast. Aaron wore a dark jacket, no tie, sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. He walked around the car, stood behind Nicole, and placed one hand on her shoulder. His mouth moved. I couldn't read lips, but the gesture was unmistakable. Reassurance. Encouragement. A coach sending a player onto the field. Nicole nodded once. She zipped the cooler bag shut, put the thermos inside her handbag, and walked toward the terminal elevator. Aaron watched her go. He didn't follow. He got back in the Audi, reversed out of the space, and drove toward the exit. At 6:51 a.m., he was gone. "He drove her," I said. "He drove her. He packed the thermos. And he made sure she went through with it," Frank said. "This isn't a woman who acted alone. This is a woman who was handled." I sat down. The cabin was silent except for the fire popping in the stove and the low hum of Frank's equipment. Outside, a November wind moved through the pines. I could hear branches scraping against the roof like fingers on a coffin lid. "Play it again," I said. Frank played it again. And again. Each time, I watched those 11 seconds. Nicole standing motionless in a concrete parking garage, holding the thermos that contained whatever compound was meant to stop my heart at 30,000 feet. 11 seconds of hesitation. 11 seconds where she could have poured it down a drain, thrown it in a trash can, told Erin she couldn't do it. 11 seconds that told me everything I needed to know. She hesitated. But she still walked into that terminal. "There's more," Frank said. He pulled up a second feed. Same garage, different angle. A wide shot that captured the Audi's license plate clearly. Oregon registration. Frank had already run it. The vehicle was registered to Blackwell Financial Advisory, LLC, Portland. The same company that had managed Gerald Whitmore's retirement portfolio before Gerald Whitmore died in his sleep 4 years ago. "And this," Frank continued. He opened a third window. Bank records. Not Nicole's errands. A wire transfer dated September 28th, 6 days before my flight. $14,200 sent from an offshore account in the Caymans to a domestic shell company called Meridian Wellness Group. Frank traced Meridian to a single-room office in Beaverton, Oregon. No employees, no clients. But one transaction stood out. A purchase order for concentrated, the kind used in pharmaceutical testing, the kind that could stop a 71-year-old man's lungs in 20 minutes. "He bought the poison," I said. My voice sounded far away, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. "He bought the poison, he prepared the delivery method, and he put it in Nicole's hands," Frank said. "She's the face. He's the machine." I closed my eyes. Behind my lids, I saw Margaret's kitchen. Summer light through the window, above the sink. Margaret teaching Nicole how to make the smoothie, the real one. The one with fresh mango and grated ginger and a tablespoon of honey. Nicole was 15, standing on a step stool because she hadn't hit her growth spurt yet. Margaret guided her hands on the blender. They were laughing. I was reading the newspaper at the table, pretending not to watch. But I watched every second. That recipe was Margaret's love made liquid. And Aaron Blackwell turned it into a weapon. He took the most sacred thing in Nicole's memory and filled it with poison. Not just poison for my body, poison for everything Margaret ever gave that girl. "What do you want to do?" Frank asked. I opened my eyes. The laptop screen still glowed with parking garage footage. Bank records, shell companies, chemical purchases. 9 days of surveillance compressed into 3 windows on a 13-inch screen. Enough evidence to end 2 lives, but not enough to answer the question that kept me awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the cabin ceiling while coyotes called across the valley. Did Nicole know what was in the thermos? Did Aaron tell her the exact compound, the exact dosage, the exact timeline? Or did he simply hand her a smoothie and say, "Give this to your father. It will make him sleep"? Did she know she was committing murder? Or did she only know she was committing betrayal? It mattered. Not legally, intent is intent. And the footage proved premeditation beyond any reasonable doubt. But it mattered to me. It mattered to the man who once watched a 15-year-old girl learn her mother's recipe in a sunlit kitchen. "I want to talk to my son," I said. Frank turned in his chair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain. "James doesn't know you're alive, Walter." "I know," I said. "That's exactly why I need to call him." The fire cracked. The wind pressed against the cabin walls. On the screen, Nicole stood frozen in a parking garage, holding a thermos, caught between the woman who raised her and the man who ruined her. 11 seconds. That was all the mercy I had left. I called James from a prepaid phone Frank bought at a gas station in Cortez. No GPS. No traceable signal. Just a plastic rectangle with 60 minutes of talk time and a crack across the screen. It was the kind of phone drug dealers use in movies. Now it was the phone a 71-year-old former federal judge used to call his only son. It rang 4 times. Each ring lasted an eternity. "Hello?" James sounded exhausted. Not the exhaustion of a long day. The exhaustion of a man who had buried his father 3 weeks ago, without a body. "James. It's Dad. Silence. Not a pause. Not a breath. Silence. The kind that has weight. The kind that presses against your chest like a hand. James, I need you to listen to me. This isn't funny. His voice cracked on the second word. Whoever this is not funny. My father is dead. He died on a plane. They told me, row 14, seat A. The flight was diverted to Wichita. Dr. Priya Sharma performed emergency treatment. The hospital registered me as John Denton. I've been in a cabin in Colorado for 22 days. Another silence. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing short, shallow breaths. The kind that come before a man either cries or throws something. Dad? A whisper. The voice of a boy. Not a 44-year-old architect. I'm alive, James. And I need to tell you something about Nicole. I told him everything. Not gently. Not in pieces. I told him the way I would have delivered a verdict, clear, sequential, without emotion. Because emotion would have destroyed us both. The smoothie. The alkaloids. Aaron Blackwell. The parking garage footage. The 11 seconds. The wire transfer through Meridian Wellness Group. The connection to Gerald Whitmore. Every fact, every timestamp, every dollar amount. When I finished, James said nothing for 41 seconds. I counted. In a courtroom, 41 seconds of silence after a verdict means the defendant is processing the end of their life as they knew it. I had just delivered that verdict to my own son about his wife. How long? He finally asked. How long what? How long has she been with him? With Aaron, of all the questions. Not are you sure? Not is there proof? Not, why didn't you call sooner? His first question was about the betrayal that cut closest to his own heart. I understood. I had been a husband too. Frank estimates at least 18 months. Possibly longer. The offshore accounts, 18 months. James repeated it the way you repeat a doctor's diagnosis. Slowly. Tasting each syllable. 18 months meant their anniversary trip to Napa. 18 months meant Christmas dinner, where Nicole carved the turkey and smiled across the table. 18 months meant every kiss, every conversation, every night in their bed was a performance delivered by a woman rehearsing for his father's murder. James, I need you to do something very difficult. Don't. His voice hardened. The boy vanished. The man returned. Don't ask me to pretend. That's exactly what I'm asking. I explained the plan. Nicole and Aaron didn't know I was alive. The official record showed a John Denton admitted to a Wichita clinic with cardiac complications, discharged, destination unknown. No death certificate had been filed because no body had been recovered. Nicole had already contacted my attorney, Gerald Whitmore's former colleague, about the life insurance claim $3.2 million. She had submitted preliminary paperwork. She was waiting for the 60-day absence threshold to petition for a presumptive death declaration. If James confronted her now, she would run. Aaron would disappear. The offshore accounts would empty overnight. And the connection to Gerald Whitmore, the one death that could elevate this from attempted murder to a pattern of predatory killing, would vanish like smoke. I need you to go home, I said. I need you to sit across from her at dinner. I need you to ask about her day, compliment her cooking, watch television with her on the couch. I need you to be the husband she thinks you are for a little longer. You're asking me to live with the woman who tried to kill my father. I'm asking you to help me prove she's done it before. The line went quiet. Through the cabin window, I watched Frank at the truck, checking the perimeter cameras he'd mounted on the pines. A light snow had started falling early for November, even in the mountains. The flakes dissolved the moment they touched the ground, as if the earth refused to let them stay. Okay, James said. The word came out flat, mechanical. The sound of a man sealing something inside himself that would eventually need to come out. I recognized it because I had made the same sound 22 days ago in a Wichita hospital bed. There are rules, I continued. Don't search her phone. Don't check her email. Don't follow her. Don't change your routine by even 5 minutes. If she senses anything at all, it's over. What if she tries again? What if there's something in my food? My water? Frank will be monitoring the house systems 24 hours a day. Every camera. Every sensor. If she opens a cabinet at 3 in the morning, we'll know. And if that's not enough, I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, it might not be enough. Frank's surveillance was extraordinary. But surveillance catches actions, not intentions. If Aaron changed the method, if he moved from poison to something less traceable, the cameras would show us a murder in progress, not prevent one. Then you call me, I said. The second something feels wrong. Not off, not unusual. Wrong. You call this number, and Frank will have someone at your door in 11 minutes. 11 minutes is a long time, Dad. I know, James exhaled. A long, shaking breath that carried 22 days of grief, the shock of resurrection, and the weight of what I was asking him to carry. He was 44 years old, and I was asking him to perform the hardest role of his life, opposite the most dangerous audience imaginable. James. One more thing. Yeah, the cabin in Asheville. Margaret's cabin. That's where this ends. I'm going to invite Nicole to the donation signing. She'll come because she thinks it's her last chance to stop the transfer. And when she walks through that door, she'll see you. She'll see me. Another silence. Snow fell outside the window. Frank finished his perimeter check and walked back toward the cabin, boots crunching on frozen ground. What do you think she'll do? James asked. When she sees you, will she break down? Or fight? I thought of 11 seconds in a parking garage, a woman holding a thermos full of poison, standing perfectly still. Both, I said. She'll do both. James drove home that night with both hands on the steering wheel and his jaw clenched so tight he could feel his molars grinding. The highway between his office in downtown Denver and the house in Cherry Hills Village was 23 minutes on a good day. Tonight, every minute was a year. He pulled into the driveway at 6:48 p.m. The porch light was on. Nicole always turned it on at 6:30, the same way she always set the table before he arrived, the same way she always greeted him with a glass of water and a question about his day. Routine. Consistency. The architecture of a life built on repetition. James had once found comfort in it. Now he understood it for what it was. Choreography. He sat in the car for 90 seconds. Engine off. Hands still on the wheel. He stared at the front door, white oak, brass handle. A wreath of dried eucalyptus Nicole had made in September. Behind that door was a woman who had poured poison into his father's smoothie and watched him drink every drop. Behind that door was his wife. His phone buzzed. A text from a number with no contact name. Frank. Cameras active. Audio active. We see everything. You are not alone. James deleted the message, took a breath that filled his lungs but not his courage, and walked inside. Hey, babe. Nicole was in the kitchen. White blouse, dark jeans, hair pulled back in a low bun. She was stirring something on the stove, a risotto, from the smell of it, Parmesan and white wine. The kitchen smelled like home. The kitchen smelled like a trap. Hey. James set his briefcase on the counter. He kissed her cheek. Her skin was warm. He felt nothing. Long day? She asked, tilting her head the way she always did. Attentive. Present. Perfectly calibrated. Zoning board pushed back the Morrison project again. Third time. He loosened his tie. The words came out normally. He was surprised by how easily they came, how smoothly a man could lie when he had no other choice. That's frustrating. Sit down. Dinner's almost ready. He sat. The dining table was set for two. White plates, cloth napkins, a single candle in the center. Margaret had taught Nicole how to set a table. Napkin on the left. Fork on the napkin, knife and spoon on the right. Margaret said a well-set table was a form of respect, a way of telling the people you fed that they mattered enough for the extra effort. Nicole set a plate in front of him. Mushroom risotto with shaved truffle, a glass of Pinot Grigio. She sat across from him and smiled. "Smells amazing," James said. He picked up his fork, and for one terrible, irrational second, he couldn't lift it to his mouth. His hand hovered above the plate while his brain screamed a single word on repeat: poison, poison, poison. The risotto blurred. The room tilted. He saw his father's face in a Wichita hospital bed, tubes in his arms, a stranger whispering, "Someone did this to you. James, you okay?" He blinked. Nicole was watching him, not with suspicion, with something worse: concern. Genuine, warm, unmistakable concern. The kind a wife shows when her husband looks pale at the dinner table. "Yeah. Just tired." He took a bite. The risotto was perfect. Creamy, earthy, the truffle dissolving on his tongue like butter. Nicole had always been an extraordinary cook. Margaret's student. Margaret's greatest project. Margaret's most devastating failure. They ate in silence for a few minutes. James studied her the way his father had taught him to study people. Not what they said, but what they did between the words. Nicole ate slowly. She held her wine glass by the stem, never the bowl. She dabbed her lips with the napkin after every third bite. She was, in every visible way, a woman, at peace. But her left hand told a different story. Between bites, when she thought James wasn't looking, her fingers moved to the base of her wine glass and traced small circles on the tablecloth, round and round. A nervous habit James had never noticed before, or perhaps had noticed 1,000 times, and never thought to question. "I talked to the insurance company today," Nicole said. She said it casually, the way someone mentions the weather or a dentist appointment. James kept chewing. Swallowed. Took a sip of wine. "Oh yeah? They need additional documentation. For your dad's policy, since they haven't officially." She trailed off. Her eyes dropped to her plate. A performance of grief. Subtle. Restrained. The kind of grief that invites sympathy without demanding attention. What kind of documentation? Medical records from the flight. The hospital in Wichita. They're saying the file is incomplete. Someone registered him under a different name, apparently. John Denton. Frank's work. The alias that kept Walter Graves alive in every way that mattered. "That sounds like a bureaucratic mess," James said. His voice was steady. His heart was not. "Gerald Dad's attorney says we might need to petition for a presumptive death declaration. It takes 60 days from the date of disappearance. We're at 31. 29 days. James did the math silently. 29 days, until Nicole could legally declare his father dead and collect $3.2 million. 29 days until Aaron Blackwell's investment paid its dividend. "Let me know if you need help with the paperwork," James said. Nicole looked up. Something shifted behind her eyes, quick, fleeting, like a fish turning beneath dark water. Relief. James recognized it because he had spent 14 years reading her face across this exact table. She had expected resistance. She had prepared arguments, justifications, emotional appeals. And James had just handed her the one thing she didn't expect: cooperation. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know this is hard. Losing him. It's been hard on both of us." James nodded. He took another bite of risotto. He complimented the truffle. He asked about her sister. He cleared the table and washed the dishes while Nicole wiped the counters. They moved around the kitchen the way they had moved around it for 14 years, a silent, practiced dance of domesticity. At 10:15 p.m., Nicole went upstairs. James heard the bathroom door close, the faucet run, the soft click of the bedroom lights switching off. He stood alone in the kitchen. The candle on the dining table had burned down to a stub, the flame trembling in a pool of liquid wax. His phone buzzed again. Same untraceable number. You did well. She suspects nothing. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be harder. James stared at the message. Then he walked to the kitchen sink, gripped the edge of the counter with both hands, and lowered his head. He didn't cry. He wanted to. He wanted to scream, to break every plate Nicole had touched, to drive back to that cabin in the mountains and beg his father to end this tonight. But he couldn't, because tomorrow he would wake up next to her, eat breakfast across from her, and kiss her goodbye at the door. And the day after that, and the day after that, for 29 more days. He deleted the message, turned off the kitchen light, and climbed the stairs to a bedroom that no longer felt like his. Nicole filed the claim on a Wednesday morning. Day 47. She wore a black dress. Not funeral black, professional black. The kind of black a woman wears when she wants to project competence and quiet sorrow simultaneously. She drove herself to the offices of Hargrove and Lennox Insurance on 17th Street in downtown Denver, parked in the underground garage, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. She carried a leather portfolio containing Walter Graves's life insurance policy, a certified copy of their family trust, medical records from the Wichita clinic, filed under John Denton, and a notarized petition for presumptive death. Frank captured everything through Nicole's own phone. Not a hack. A mirror. A passive shadow application embedded in a routine software update that Garrett Technologies pushed to every connected device in the household. Nicole never noticed because there was nothing to notice. No icon. No battery drain. No permissions alert. Just a silent witness living inside the device she carried everywhere. I watched from the cabin. The screen showed Nicole sitting across from a claims adjuster named Patricia Holden, mid-50s, bifocals. A pen she kept clicking when she was thinking. The audio was clear enough. Every word arrived through the cabin's speakers with a 2-second delay, like watching a life implode in slow motion. The policy value is $3.2 million, Nicole said. She placed the document on the desk with both hands. Steady. No tremor. My father-in-law named my husband and me as joint beneficiaries. 60-40 split. 60% to James, 40% to me. And the circumstances of Mr. Graves' disappearance? He collapsed on a flight from Denver to Asheville. The plane diverted to Wichita. He was treated at a local clinic. Under an assumed name, we believe the hospital made an administrative error. After discharge, he was never seen again. That was 47 days ago. Patricia clicked her pen 3 times. Mrs. Graves, a presumptive death declaration typically requires a longer absence period. Most courts, 13 days. Nicole's voice didn't waver. In 13 days, we reached the 60-day threshold. I'm filing the preliminary claim now so that processing can begin immediately upon judicial approval. My attorney has already submitted the petition to the probate court. Efficient. Rehearsed. Aaron's fingerprints were invisible, but unmistakable. This was not a grieving daughter-in-law fumbling through bureaucracy. This was a coordinated operation, executing on schedule. Frank leaned back in his chair. She's done this before. I didn't respond, because I was watching something Patricia Holden couldn't see. On the mirrored phone feed, a second window showed Nicole's text messages. 3 minutes before the meeting, she had sent a message to an unsaved number. Filing now. 13 days. The response came in 11 seconds. Good. Asheville property next. Don't mention the cabin until the insurance clears. Aaron. Managing the sequence. Insurance. First $3.2 million. Cabin second $1.9 million. Total harvest. $5.1 million from a dead man who wasn't dead. I need to make a call, I told Frank. I walked to the porch. The November air hit my lungs like cold water. Snow had settled on the mountains overnight, turning the peaks white against a steel-gray sky. I dialed Detective Maria Santos on the prepaid phone. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Denton. She still used the alias. Protocol. She filed today. Hargrove and Lennox. Downtown Denver. The adjuster is Patricia Holden. We know. We have a flag on the policy. Santos paused. I could hear papers shuffling, a chair creaking. Mr. Denton, I need you to understand something. Filing a fraudulent insurance claim is a felony. But filing a claim is not, by itself, proof of attempted murder. We need the connection between the claim, the poisoning, and Blackwell. We need the chain. You have the footage. The bank records. The shell company. I have footage of a man and a woman in a parking garage. I have bank records that show a transfer to a company that purchased chemicals. What I don't have is a direct link between those chemicals and the substance found in your blood work. The Wichita Clinic ran a basic toxicology panel. It flagged anomalies but couldn't identify the specific compound. Without a confirmed match between what Meridian purchased and what entered your body, a defense attorney will drive a truck through this case. She was right. I had spent 31 years on the bench. I knew exactly how a good defense attorney would dismantle circumstantial evidence. Proximity is not causation. Correlation is not conspiracy. A smoothie is not a weapon until you can prove what was inside it. What do you need? I asked. A sample. The original thermos, if it still exists. Or a secondary purchase. If Blackwell buys from Meridian again, we can obtain a warrant, test the product, and match it to your blood work. One confirmed chemical link. And the entire chain locks into place. And if the thermos is gone, then we need him to buy again. Or we need someone close to him to confirm the compound. Someone close to him. Nicole. I stood on the porch, watching snow drift through the pines. Somewhere in Denver, Nicole was shaking Patricia Holden's hand, thanking her for her time, walking back to the underground garage with a leather portfolio that contained the opening move of a $5.1 million theft. Somewhere in Portland, Aaron Blackwell was reading a 2-word text, filing now, and calculating his return on investment. And somewhere in Cherry Hills Village, James was sitting at his desk, pretending to review architectural drawings while counting the 13 days his wife needed to legally erase his father. I called James that evening. He answered before the first ring finished. She came home happy, he said. The word happy sounded like a wound. She made pasta. She opened a bottle of the Barolo we were saving for our anniversary. She said she felt like things were finally moving forward. Moving forward, I repeated. Dad, I can't do 13 more days of this. You can. And you will. Because in 13 days, Nicole is going to walk into a cabin in Asheville, expecting to stop a property donation. Instead, she's going to find me sitting in Margaret's chair. And Santos, the detective? Santos needs one more piece. A chemical match. If Aaron orders from Meridian again, she can get a warrant. If not, what? I watched the last light fade behind the mountains. The sky turned from gray to purple to black, the way a bruise darkens over time. Then we make him order again. James was quiet. Then, how? By giving him a reason to need more poison. The line hummed between us. Father and son, separated by 400 miles of highway and a plan that was about to become very dangerous. Trust me, I said. I've always trusted you, Dad. It's everybody else I'm learning not to. I hung up. Frank was waiting inside, his face lit by the blue glow of 6 surveillance feeds. He looked at me and raised one eyebrow, the only question he ever needed to ask. We're going to Asheville, I said. But first, we're going to make Aaron Blackwell very, very nervous. We made Aaron nervous the old-fashioned way. We let him think the dead man was haunting him. Frank started with the Meridian Wellness Group. A single email, sent from an anonymous server routed through 3 countries, landed in Meridian's inbox at 2:14 a.m. on day 49. The subject line read, regarding your September 28th purchase, order compliance, review pending. The body of the email was empty. No signature, no return address. Just a subject line designed to make someone lose sleep. It worked. Within 6 hours, Aaron called Nicole. Frank's mirror application captured every word. "Did you talk to anyone about Meridian?" Aaron's voice was tight, controlled, but tight. The voice of a man checking the locks on a door he thought was already sealed. "What?" "No." "What's Meridian?" "Don't play games with me, Nicole. I'm not playing anything. I don't know what Meridian is." "Aaron, what's going on?" He hung up. 14 seconds later, he called a second number, a Portland area code Frank had flagged weeks ago. The call lasted 91 seconds. Frank couldn't identify the recipient, but the conversation was clear enough. Aaron asked someone to clean the Beaverton office and move everything offshore before Friday. Frank smiled for the first time since I'd met him. Panicking people make mistakes. Panicking people with offshore accounts make federal mistakes. Day 50. Frank sent a second message. This time, not to Meridian, to Aaron directly. A text from an untraceable number, delivered at 3:07 a.m., the hour when the mind is weakest and every shadow looks like a confession. Gerald Whitmore didn't die in his sleep. 4 words. Aaron read them at 3:09 a.m. His phone screen lit up in a dark Portland bedroom, captured by a traffic camera Frank had accessed through a municipal maintenance portal. Aaron sat up in bed. He didn't move for 7 minutes. Then he called Nicole again. This time, she didn't answer. Day 51. The third and final provocation. Frank mailed a physical envelope to Aaron's Portland office. Inside, a single photograph. The parking garage at Denver International Airport, Level 3, Section C, October 4th, 6:47 a.m. Nicole holding the thermos. Aaron standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. No note. No demand. No threat. Just proof that someone had been watching from the very beginning. Aaron received the envelope at 11:20 a.m. By 11:43 a.m., he had booked a one-way flight to Denver. By 2:15 p.m., he was in Nicole's kitchen, pacing between the island and the refrigerator, while Nicole sat at the table with her hands flat on the surface, the way a person braces for an earthquake. Frank and I watched through the kitchen camera. The audio was pristine. "Someone knows," Aaron said. He was sweating. November in Denver, 61 degrees inside the house, and he was sweating through his collar. Someone has the garage footage. Someone knows about Meridian. Someone knows about Gerald. "Who?" Nicole whispered. "I don't know. But we need to accelerate the timeline. The insurance claim. Can you push the court date? The petition is filed. The hearing is set for day 60. I can't move it faster without raising flags. Then we take the cabin now. Before the hearing, get Walter's attorney to release the property transfer documents. Tell him you want to honor Walter's wish to donate it. Tell him you want to complete the signing in Asheville, at the cabin, as a memorial gesture." Nicole stared at him. "You want me to go to the cabin? I want you to go to the cabin. Sign the documents and redirect the donation to our trust instead of the Alzheimer's Foundation. Gerald's guy in Asheville can notarize it. By the time anyone reviews the paperwork, the property will be ours and we'll be gone." "Gone where?" "Somewhere, without extradition." The word landed in the kitchen like a stone dropped in still water. Extradition. The vocabulary of criminals, not financial advisors, not stepdaughters. Nicole heard it, and something shifted in her face. Not fear recognition. The recognition that she had crossed a line so far behind her that she couldn't even see it anymore. "When?" she asked. 3 days. I'll set everything up. You fly to Asheville on Saturday morning. Nicole nodded. Slowly. The way someone nods when they've stopped thinking and started surviving. Frank turned to me. Saturday. That's day 54. I know. We need to be there first. I know that too. That night, the last night in the cabin, Frank packed his equipment into 3 cases: laptop, backup drives, signal boosters, the portable router that had kept us connected to a dead man's smart home for 37 days. He worked methodically, the way he'd always worked. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words. Every cable coiled, every hard drive labeled. A man dismantling a command center the way a soldier dismantles a foxhole, with the knowledge that the next position would be the final one. I sat on the porch. The stars over Durango were obscene in their clarity. Thousands of them, scattered across a sky so black it looked like the universe had been poured from a bottle. Margaret would have loved this sky. She used to drag me outside on clear nights in Asheville, pointing at constellations she'd memorized from a book she bought at a yard sale. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades. She called them the 7 sisters and made up stories about each one. I never remembered the stories. I remembered her voice telling them. Tomorrow, I would drive to Asheville. I would enter the cabin where Margaret and I spent 34 summers. I would sit in her chair beside the stone fireplace and wait for the woman who stole her recipe, poisoned her husband, and was now coming to steal her legacy. I had rehearsed this moment for 37 days. I knew exactly what I would say. I knew exactly where Santos and her team would be positioned. I knew exactly when Frank would lock the doors remotely and when the recording devices would activate. What I didn't know what kept me awake on that porch until the stars faded and the first gray light crept over the mountains was whether I would see Margaret's daughter walk through that door. Or a stranger. I wanted it to be a stranger. God help me. I wanted it to be a stranger. Because if I saw Margaret in her face, even for a second, I wasn't sure I could finish what I'd started. Frank stepped onto the porch at 5:15 a.m. 2 coffee mugs. Black. No sugar. Ready? He asked. I took the mug. The coffee was bitter and too hot, and exactly what I needed. No, I said. But that's never stopped me before. We loaded the truck in silence and drove east into the sunrise. The cabin smelled like pine and dust and 34 years of Margaret. We arrived at 7:22 a.m. on Saturday. Frank disabled the old alarm system, swept the rooms, and installed 3 concealed recording devices, one in the living room ceiling fan, one behind the kitchen clock, one inside the stone fireplace mantel. Detective Santos and 2 federal agents were positioned in an unmarked van behind the tree line, 200 yards down the gravel road. Close enough to respond in 90 seconds. Far enough to be invisible. I walked through the cabin slowly. Everything was exactly as Margaret had left it. The quilted throw on the rocking chair. The row of novels on the shelf above the window. Spines cracked and sun-faded. The kitchen where she made blueberry pancakes every Sunday morning, the cast-iron skillet still hanging from its hook above the stove. The porch where she sat with her coffee and watched deer cross the meadow at dawn. I sat in her chair. The leather was cold. The cushion still held the shape of her body, or maybe I imagined it. Maybe after 7 years, the only impression left was the one she'd made on me. Frank checked his phone. Nicole's flight landed in Asheville at 9:17. She rented a car at the terminal. GPS puts her 43 minutes out. And Aaron, separate flight, landed at 8:45. He's at a hotel downtown. Not coming to the cabin. He's the exit plan rental car, cash, 2 passports in a safe deposit box, at First National. If everything goes smoothly, they drive to Charlotte tonight and fly out of the country tomorrow morning. It won't go smoothly, I said. Frank positioned himself in the back bedroom with a laptop showing every camera feed the driveway, the porch, the living room, the kitchen. Santos confirmed her team was in position. The recording devices were active. Every word spoken inside the cabin from this moment forward would be captured, time-stamped, and admissible. At 10:04 a.m., a white rental sedan appeared at the end of the gravel road. I watched through the window as Nicole parked beside the cabin. She sat in the car for a full minute, engine running, hands on the wheel. Through the windshield, I could see her face. She was wearing Margaret's pearl earrings, the ones Margaret wore on our wedding day. The ones I gave Nicole on her 30th birthday because Margaret had asked me to, 3 months before the Alzheimer's stole the last of her words. Nicole turned off the engine. She picked up a leather folder from the passenger seat, the property documents, I assumed. She checked her phone, typed something, put the phone in her coat pocket. Then she opened the door and stepped onto the gravel. She walked to the porch. Her heels clicked on the wooden steps, 3 steps. The third one still creaked the way it had creaked for 20 years. She reached for the door handle. I could have locked it. Frank had remote access. One keystroke and the deadbolt would have engaged, and Nicole would have stood on that porch until Santos walked up the gravel road with handcuffs. Clean, simple, surgical. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was a conversation. The plan was a confession. The plan was to sit in Margaret's chair and look into the eyes of the woman Margaret loved like a daughter and ask her why. The door opened. Nicole stepped inside. She saw the fireplace first. Cold. No fire. Then the kitchen. Then the rocking chair with the quilted throw. Her eyes moved across the room the way eyes move across a childhood bedroom after years away. Recognition. Memory. The faintest tremor of something that might have been grief. Then she saw me. I have delivered thousands of verdicts. I have watched defendants receive life sentences. I have seen the exact moment when a human being understands that the world they built has collapsed. I thought I knew what that looked like. I was wrong. Nicole didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't speak. Her body simply stopped, every muscle, every breath, every electrical signal frozen in place. The leather folder slipped from her fingers and hit the hardwood floor. The sound was small and final, like the last note of a song. "Sit down, Nicole," I said. She didn't sit. She stood in the doorway, one hand still on the handle, staring at me the way you stare at something that violates the laws of the world you understand. I was a dead man in a dead woman's chair. I was impossible. You're. Her voice broke. Not from emotion, from physics. Her throat had closed, and the words simply couldn't get through. Alive. Yes. Sit down. She sat. Not in a chair. On the floor. Her legs folded beneath her, and she lowered herself onto the hardwood 3 feet from the door, as if her body had made the decision without consulting her mind. The leather folder lay between us like evidence at a trial. "The smoothie didn't work," I said. Dr. Priya Sharma, seat 22C, recognized the symptoms. The pilot diverted to Wichita. I spent 4 hours in a clinic, registered under a false name. I've been watching you for 54 days. Nicole's hands were shaking. Not trembling shaking. Violent, involuntary spasms that traveled from her fingers up her wrists and into her forearms. She pressed them flat against the floor, trying to make them stop. "I know about Aaron," I continued. "I know about Meridian Wellness Group. I know about the alkaloids. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell company in Beaverton. And I know about Gerald Whitmore." At Gerald's name, something cracked. Nicole's head dropped. Her chin touched her chest. A sound came from her throat, not a word, not a cry. Something older, something that existed before language. The sound a person makes when every wall they've built collapses simultaneously. "Why?" I asked. The question hung in the cabin like smoke. Outside, a bird called from the tree line. The third porch step creaked in the wind. Margaret's novels watched from the shelf with their cracked spines and faded covers. Nicole raised her head. Her mascara had run. Margaret's pearl earrings caught the light from the window. And when she finally spoke, her voice was not the voice of a killer. It was the voice of a 10-year-old girl standing in a courthouse hallway, waiting to find out which stranger would take her home. "Because she left me," Nicole whispered. "Margaret left me. And you were going to give away the only place where she didn't." The cabin went silent. In the back bedroom, Frank's laptop recorded everything. In the van behind the tree line, Santos listened. In a hotel downtown, Aaron Blackwell waited for a phone call that would never come the way he expected. And in Margaret's chair, a 71-year-old man, felt something he hadn't prepared for. He understood. I let the silence hold for as long as it needed to. Nicole stayed on the floor. Her breathing had slowed from ragged gasps to something quieter, the shallow, measured rhythm of a person who has emptied themselves completely. Margaret's pearl earrings hung from her ears like small white moons. Her mascara had drawn dark rivers down both cheeks. She looked nothing like a criminal. She looked like a girl who had lost her mother twice and decided to burn down the world rather than lose her a third time. I understood. That was the worst part. I understood. But understanding is not absolution. And a cabin full of recording devices is not a confessional. Nicole, I said. Detective Santos is outside. 2 federal agents are with her. They have everything. The footage, the bank records. Meridian. Gerald Whitmore. Everything. She closed her eyes. A single tear ran down her left cheek, following the mascara track like a river, finding its old bed. Aaron is at the Asheville Grand Hotel, room 614. He has 2 passports and a rental car pointed toward Charlotte. He thinks you're going to call him when the documents are signed. Santos will be at his door before noon. Nicole opened her eyes. He told me it would just make you sleep, she said. Her voice was flat, emptied. On the plane, he said you'd fall asleep, and they'd take you to a hospital, and you'd be confused, and the doctors would say it was a cardiac event. He said no one would test for it. He said it was safe. Safe. I repeated. I knew it wasn't. I knew from the moment he handed me the thermos in the parking garage. I stood there, and I knew. She pressed her palms against the hardwood. 11 seconds. I stood there for 11 seconds and I knew exactly what I was doing. 11 seconds. The same 11 seconds Frank and I had watched on the footage 100 times. She had counted them too. Why didn't you stop? I asked. Nicole looked at the fireplace, the stone mantel, the framed photograph that still sat on top Margaret and me on our wedding day, standing under a magnolia tree, laughing at something neither of us remembered anymore. Because I hated you, she said. Not for anything you did. For what you were going to do. You were going to give this cabin to strangers. Research scientists. People who never sat in that kitchen while she taught me how to fold dumplings. People who never heard her sing in the garden. You were going to let them walk on her floors and sleep in her bed and call it a facility. Her voice cracked on the last word. Facility. The clinical language of Alzheimer's care. The language that had replaced Margaret's name in brochures and medical reports for the last 3 years of her life. She was my mother, Nicole whispered. Not by blood, not by law, but she was my mother. And this cabin is the only place in the world where I can still hear her voice. I sat in Margaret's chair and felt the weight of every word. She was right, not about the poisoning, not about the theft, not about Aaron or the insurance or any of the crimes that would send her to prison, but about this. Margaret was her mother, and I was giving away the only home that still held Margaret's fingerprints. The front door opened. Santos stepped inside, dark coat, badge visible, 2 agents flanking her. She looked at Nicole on the floor, then at me. She waited. She had the decency to wait. Nicole Graves, Santos said. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Walter Graves and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Nicole stood. She didn't resist. She held out her wrists and let Santos close the handcuffs with a click that echoed through the cabin like a door shutting for the last time. As they led her to the door, she paused at the threshold. She turned back to me. Margaret's pearls caught the morning light. I'm sorry, she said. Not for what I did to you. For what I did to her. They took her down the 3 porch steps. The third one creaked. The white rental sedan sat in the driveway next to the unmarked van. November sunlight fell through the Blue Ridge canopy in long golden shafts. It was, by any objective measure, a beautiful morning. Aaron Blackwell was arrested at 11:47 a.m. in room 614 of the Asheville Grand Hotel. He had $43,000 in cash, 2 forged passports, 1 Canadian, 1 Brazilian, and a laptop containing detailed financial records, linking him to the deaths of Gerald Whitmore and a second victim in Tucson, Arizona, a 63-year-old retired teacher named Dolores Vega, whose estate Aaron had liquidated 18 months before he met Nicole. Santos told me later that when the agents knocked, Aaron tried to jump from the 6th-floor balcony. He made it as far as the railing before they pulled him back. Nicole received 12 years. Aaron received consecutive life sentences, 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 1 count of attempted murder, 14 counts of financial fraud. The Meridian Wellness Group was dismantled. The offshore accounts were frozen and returned to the estates of Gerald Whitmore and Dolores Vega. James filed for divorce on a Tuesday. He didn't tell me. I found out from Frank, who found out from a courthouse filing that appeared in a routine database sweep. I called James that evening. He answered, "We didn't talk about Nicole. We talked about the cabin. Are you still going to donate it?" he asked. I stood on the porch. Margaret's garden had gone wild in the months since anyone had tended it. The rosemary had overtaken the lavender. The mint had spread beyond its border and colonized the walkway. The tomato cages stood empty and rusted. But the magnolia, the one Margaret planted the summer we bought the cabin, the one we stood under in our wedding photograph, was still there. Taller now. Its branches reached over the porch roof like arms, offering shade to anyone who needed it. "No," I said. "I'm going to keep it. Mom would have liked that." "No. Your mother would have told me I was a sentimental fool. And then she would have made blueberry pancakes and told me to fix the 3rd step." James laughed. It was the first time I had heard him laugh since October. It sounded like something returning from a long way away. I kept the cabin. I fixed the 3rd step. I hired a local woman named Helen to help with the garden 3 days a week. She didn't know Margaret. She didn't need to. She had her own ghosts, her own reasons for wanting to put her hands in soil and watch things grow. On a morning in April, 6 months after a woman handed me a thermos in a parking garage, I walked into the garden with a cup of coffee. Real coffee. Black. No sugar. The magnolia was blooming. White petals, wide and heavy, bending the branches with their weight. They looked like cupped hands. They looked like offerings. I sat beneath the tree. The sun was warm. The coffee was bitter. The garden was coming back. Margaret would have hated the weeds. She would have loved the magnolia. She would have looked at me sitting there alone, 72 years old, alive against all odds, drinking coffee under her tree, and she would have said the same thing she always said when I survived something I shouldn't have. "Well, Walter, now what?" I sipped my coffee, watched a cardinal land on the porch railing, listened to the morning settle into place. "Now," I said to no one, "I tend the garden.